Hello, this is Aaron Maller from Parallax, and this video is going to go over the additions and changes that have been made to the Parallax Door Library in version 8.3. In this release, we've added in a number of new families, as well as an entirely new drafted detail library that's coming with these doors. There have also been a number of corrections, and also the start of some new features that won't quite be finished until 8.4 comes out. But for now, let's jump into everything that's changed in this release. To start, let's take a look at the new parent families that have been added to the library in this release. For overhead doors, there have always been coiling overhead doors and sectional overhead doors. Recently, we've been asked by a number of clients for vertical sectional overhead doors where the track more closely follows the wall. So this new family, called Overhead Sectional Vertical, has been created in both wall-hosted and curtain panel-based versions as well. These allow you to set a parameter for the angle of the upper track, so if we change this from 10 to 25 degrees, you'll see the track move farther away from the wall, and that's now where the door panel will go in both the opened and closed positions as well. These overhead sectional vertical doors have been created as both instance-based doors, and then also there are unit variations or type-based families as well. Another quick change that was made to the overhead sectional door is that there is now a frame option for whether or not a garage door opener exists on those components. That way, if you're doing a residential project or a project where you want to account for the space of the garage door opener, you can see that in your model as well. Another new series of doors that was started in version 8.3 is the aircraft or the hangar multiflex doors. Similar to the multiflexes that came out in version 8.2, these allow you to enter in how many panels there are in either direction. There is a single-side telescoping option, and there is also a biparting or two-sided telescoping option where you can set the number of panels that open in each direction. Because these are made to be used in aircraft hangars, there is also an additional parameter for the additional space that the track runs off to the side, since these door panels can usually be stacked a greater distance than beyond the jamb opening. That allows you to show the hangar doors appropriately, and then if you want to see the aircraft behind them, you can move the panels into the open position, and then you can see inside your hangar. Like all of the other doors in the library, different panels can be swapped out into the hangar collection. Making our way back to people-sized doors, there is also now a new area in the sample file that is just started off to the top of the traditional rectangular door openings. That's because more of our clients have needed archtop doors. Because of that, there is now a single swing archtop parent door family, and then also a double swing archtop door family. Over time, the rest of the door actions will be built out of archtops where they make sense. A couple of important things to note is that archtop meant that there also had to be additional panel and additional frame types to go along with the archtop parent family. So you'll see here that when you are using the archtop wall-hosted door family, we're loading a panel that has parentheses AT for archtop at the end of it. Similarly, if you were to go look at the frame selector on the archtop family, you would see that this is frame 001 hollow metal 1 with a parentheses AT at the end. Hopefully it goes without saying, but if you're using an archtop door family, you're going to need the AT in parentheses for both the frame and the panel, or it's not going to work correctly. The AT panel and the AT frame are all built to respect different values for the height of the archtops. So you'll see here there is an archtop arc height input, and if it's on 1 foot and we change it to 1'6", then of course the archtop is going to get taller, and the frame and the panel are both going to respond to that. One thing to note is that when we're looking at this panel type here, it is parentheses AT, which means a single archtop panel in this door. If we move to the double archtop doors, you'll notice here that the Panel type selector for this door is using a panel type that's called parentheses AT2, which means it's an archtop double panel. That's important because the radius of the archtop double panel needs to only cut itself halfway out of the door, where one end of the panel needs to remain full height. So the AT2 panels will be used in the archtop doubles, and the AT panels will be used in the archtop singles. Again, this library is just getting started, so for right now there are just the two actions, and then there is the archtop opening with no panel, and a couple of panels have been started in the archtop area of the sample file, but currently there are just a couple of F archtops, and then there is the one with the radiused light at the top of it. As the library keeps going, more of those archtops will be built going forward. Based on user feedback, there are a couple of other changes that we started to make to some of the parent families. Specifically, door action styles where it might be possible for the panels to want to be larger than the opening that happens in the wall, we've started to add in opening reduction parameters. A few examples are the coiling overhead door. In this situation, you're looking at a 9-foot tall coiling overhead panel that only wants to have a 7-foot tall hole in the wall. This might be something that happens if you want the coiling assembly to be above a ceiling, that way it doesn't create a conflict, or maybe you want it farther up the wall in a warehouse to avoid other utilities. So you'll notice in the coiling overhead wall-hosted family now, there is a parameter called frame opening reduction, and that allows you to schedule this door as 9 feet tall, but only have a 7-foot hole in the wall itself. This type of thing has also started to happen to basically the sliding bypass person doors. In this particular case, if we were to select this door, you'll see that it has a frame opening reduction jam parameter. So this means that we have the size of the two panels, but then if we reduce the opening size, the panels will start to overlap in the middle. You will notice that the parameters are different, and that's something that we are resolving in the 8.4 build. This will be the format of the parameters. There will be frame opening reduction jam and frame opening reduction head that will get used in the vertical direction. This is something that's going to happen in the sliding bypass doors, the surface sliding doors, and the pocket doors as well. It's already existed in some of those families, but some of those families were actually just hijacking the jam width parameter to work in the negative direction and to remove those values from the width of the door opening. But that's not very sustainable if in the future we end up having frame types that actually want to have some sort of trim on the sides of those doors. So this is a much more extensible solution, and we'll be working through that through more of the doors in 8.4. Another addition to version 8.3 of the door library is that the library is now shipping with an additional file of drafted details. These are drafting views for all of the head, jam, and sill options that are in the door library. Note that they're not all complete at this point in time. We've focused on the person doors and getting some decent coverage of wrapping frames and butted frames in both wood stud and metal stud partitions, even though the actual door detail itself is not really different. That way, if you're working on a project that has wood-framed partitions, you can show the jam for AL1 in a wood partition, or you could show jam AL1 in a metal stud partition as well. Note that the W01 does not mean wood, it means this is a wrapped condition around the partition. And if you were to go to the head and jam butted in wood stud, then you would see B01 for the frame conditions where you have the frame set to not by throat depth, which means it's a butted condition and we want it to look different. The drafted views in this file are all done with detail components out of the Parallax Team Detail Component Library, and they do have keynotes assigned to them, which is what makes up the notes in the majority of the views. A keynote file is also now shipped with this door library in case you want to make modifications to these notes. As mentioned, not all of the doors have their head jambs and sills done yet, particularly the specialty doors, the overhead doors, the surface sliding doors, and such. We are still working on all of the options for a lot of those doors. Something that also became more obvious once we started putting all the drafting views together was that the specialty doors, such as the pockets and the surface sliders, were only identifiable in their frame nomenclature using the number that indicated the type of frame that it was. That's problematic because the frame numbers don't show up in the head, jamb, and sill details. Because of that, we did discuss and implement a change where now, as an example, a pocket door using the wood 4 profile now says wood 4 with a P at the end of it, in addition to being a specific number for the pocket door. What this means is some frames did slightly change their name and number in the library. As an example, if we go find a pocket door in the library, you'll see that if we select the pocket door frame, this is now frame 601.hollowmetal2 (P) for pocket. That change makes it so that then when it uses a frame that is HM2P in the details for the jamb and the head, that is somewhat contiguous with what we're showing in the library as well. So some frames have changed their taxonomy in terms of this one is now wood 5 (S) for sliding, and so on. Again, the drafted detail file is in its first version, and of course there will be additional door details coming out with subsequent releases of the library. That's also part of the reason that we've used this naming standard, where this is a door jamb, it is using a frame style that is AL1, and this is wrapping condition 01. The reason for that nomenclature is, when we were looking at this detail before, there are many variations of this particular detail, and the JIP may not want to wrap into this jamb. Using butted 01, this will then allow us to have multiple series of butted conditions. There can be a butted 02, where the JIP does not wrap beneath the frame. There could be a butted 11, which means it's a whole different series of jamb conditions, and so on. This is our first pass at this detail library, so the next time when 8.4 comes out, there's a good chance there will be considerably more door details. This is really just our first jumping off point. The next item on the list is all of the corrections and improvements that were made throughout the door library. A big one that we went through was all of the material finish assignments in the panels and the frames, and because of that, you may notice that in the sample file, a lot of the frames and panels are set to bright red and bright green. This is simply a matter of us going through and doing testing in this file to make sure all the render assignments are working properly. We got some feedback from some rendering teams that a lot of the panels and frames, particularly the raised wood panels and frames, were not necessarily showing the right render materials on all of the crevices of the raised wood panels. That has all been corrected in every single panel and frame in the library in this go-around. In addition, a large number of the frames had a frame sill height parameter that was created a long time ago, but was never actually fully connected in the library. We went through all of the frames so that now if you were to take one of the frame types and you were to adjust its sill height, the frame extrusions at the bottom of those frames will now properly use the sill height parameter. Also, a number of small corrections have been made in a whole bunch of families throughout the library, including correcting the hinge counts on the sectional overhead door panels, also fixing some material assignments that were incorrect in terms of finish 2 or finish 3. We've also corrected some door families that shouldn't have had shape handles when you selected them in plan or elevation, and we've also fixed some join geometry errors or swings that weren't showing up in the correct view, like in the case of the revolving doors, which were still showing the modeled panels in plan. That was problematic if you're in one of the offices where you turned off the panel visibility in your view templates. Now that we correctly have swing visibility showing up in those revolving doors, it's no longer a problem to have the panels turned off. One other minor correction that was started in version 8.3, but that will not be finished until version 8.4, is that while we were making the drafted detail library for the doors, it did come to our attention that a lot of the aluminum frames were still modeled as if they were solid. The intent of these is, of course, for them to be modeled like aluminum extrusions, and so you'll see here that in the single basic frame for aluminum 1, the 001, it's now been converted to being a hollow frame with just an aluminum squared off shape. Aluminum 2 has also been edited in that fashion, but we have not propagated that change through all of the other AL1 and AL2 frames. Eventually, in 8.4, that will make its way through all of the other aluminum frames so that they are all modeled correctly. In addition to all of these corrections in the library, we also took a run through the dynamo graphs that ship with the door library to update them a little bit. The dynamo graphs were originally built in a much earlier version of Revit, and because of that, a lot of different dynamo versions have come out, and also a lot of different versions of Revit have come out, and some aspects of those graphs were no longer functioning properly or needed to be updated because of things that have changed with the nodes or with the packages. As a reminder, there are a number of different dynamo graphs that come with the door library. If we go check them out, they've been renamed to call themselves version 2. There is now a dynamo graph that will do all of the door numbering starting at the parent family and trying to infer the numbering based on the 2-room and from room. If you have already numbered your parent families, there is a graph that will just do the second half of the first graph, and that is renumbering all of the nested shared families so that they don't have duplicate mark values. If you do want to do some coordination between which doors are hosted in which wall types, there is a graph that will write the host wall type name in any parameter you want in the doors, as long as they are not grouped, or if they are grouped, but that parameter is set to vary by group instance. There's also another one that will export a CSV file of what the wall's ratings are and what that door's ratings are. And lastly, if you're doing some kind of visualization and you would like to alter the render gaps parameter or open and close all of the doors in the project, there is a graph that will do that as well. Just to go look at one of the new graphs that have been updated, they are still the original graphs, they've just been cleaned up a little bit. They are not perfect from a Dynamo implementation point of view, of course, but this is the one that will renumber all of the parent families based on their 2-room and from-room data. So in this little sample from our sample file, we have unnumbered all of the doors, and if we simply open the graph and make sure it's on the correct phase, and then hit run, and you'll see that it will now number all of the doors based on their room number. One important note is that these graphs do depend on packages, and later versions of Revit and later versions of Dynamo have changed the languages that they're using, so you may need to go into Edit and hit Set Python Engine to IronPython 3 for this particular graph to work. In the future, we may replace some nodes in the graph that will make that no longer necessary, but we have updated the Dynamo graphs that ship with the door library for your use. Okay, so that wraps up all of the changes and improvements that are coming out in version 8.3. Historically, updates have come out a lot faster than this. This is the longest that we've gone in between 2 updates, and really what was driving that is so many small incremental things like the archtop doors and the material check on every panel and every frame kept coming up over the last couple of years, and so that's why 8.3 was so slow coming out. We already have a list of what we're hoping to get done in 8.4 between expanding the drafted detail library, finishing the aluminum frame profile changes, developing more of the archtops now that that library is underway, and so we're hoping that 8.4 will be out a lot sooner than it took us to get out 8.3. If you have any questions about the door library or getting it configured into your templates, feel free to reach out and give us a shout, and happy modeling!